This meeting is being recorded.
Hey, good morning, everyone. It's about 11 o'clock Eastern time. Looks like we're uh, good morning, everyone. 11 a.m. We're going to try to get started on time. People can come in as they are available. Real quick, I'm Carl Madison. I'm the chair of the National Capital Presbytery Stewardship Committee. Got a few of our amazing members on right now. Jim Feather and Jerry Fields, thanks for being here and helping us put this together. And our fearless staff representative Lawan, who is kind of our central nervous system, and soon to be Dina, who's on here as well. So just welcome to all of them. Huge welcome to John Molina Moore, our general presbyter. He is a great supporter of ours, which for our truly unique committee throughout within the presbytery world. Um, and he is offered to open us in prayer today. John?
Thank you, Carl. Wonderful to see you all here to explore all the creative tools we can use to think about stewardship for our churches. So as we dive in and play with some of these AI tools and what they're going to do, let's first open up in prayer. Would you join me in a word of prayer? God, we thank you for being a generous God, for giving us the people, the tools, the resources, the energy, the ability that we need to be your church. We ask that you open our ears, open our hearts, open our eyes for our conversation today, that we might find ways to implement what is heard, what is shared, what is said back into our congregations, into our communities, into our ministries, so that we can do one thing, which is to grow your church, to find out how we can continue to support your work on the ground inside our congregations. We thank you for the leadership on this team today. We thank you for voices who are going to be sharing words from you on how we do this work in the church. We pray over Zoom connections and Wi-Fi connections and 5G connections, that things are heard and said and known with clarity. And if they are not, let them be amplified in other ways so that they resonate with us. We ask that you bless this time today together, and we pray all this in your holy and beautiful name. Amen. All right, I'm handing that back to Carl. Yes.
Hey, John, thank you. I want to thank you again for supporting this committee. We're a pretty exciting committee, and your support and encouragement is like the gas in the tank. So
Yes.
it's appreciated. Full stop. Hey, again, welcome everyone for being here. I want to introduce our speaker today on artificial intelligence, and let me tell you why Adam Kehoe is the one giving this presentation. I've been working with Adam for many years, and he is truly today's version of a Renaissance man. The genius in his head is everything from history to science, research, data, and to kind of engineering anything with technology. And so we're really fortunate to have someone with the ability to pull all of these different parts into this one conversation. He researches and listens to like the latest on artificial intelligence on a regular basis. He and I actually talk about it probably at least once a week, if not more, both from a functional, what does it do, to like the existential, like what does that mean for us? And so I just want you to know that you've got probably one of the best resources because he can also speak our language, if you will, like normal English. He can translate it. And so I'm going to hand it over to Adam so that we can get a little bit of a ride for what this is and how we can use it. Adam, you good?
Yeah, thanks so much, Carl. That's very, very generous as always. So I'm gonna get my screen shared here, and hopefully everyone can see that. Carl, give me a thumbs up if it's looking okay.
Looking good.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately we had a little technical hiccup, so we're not going to be in the full slide show view, but I think we'll be just okay. So we'll get started. So the goal is I really want to spend most of our time on practical tools and really concrete examples, really specific stuff. And my hope is that you'll see something that will be interesting to try out in your own work. But to get there, we need to do just a little bit of a background and just kind of overview to understand generative AI, some of the vocabulary. And we'll also talk a little bit about why this whole field is moving so quickly. It's actually really important because things have been evolving almost on like a monthly basis. And I feel like I'd be doing a disservice if we don't talk a couple of just big picture things about that, because it does influence what the practicalities of these tools, look like. And as I said, we're going to spend hopefully most of our time really on nuts and bolts, practical kinds of things. So to get started on just what generative AI is. So if you think about artificial intelligence, it's actually a field that's been around for a long time now. Just the broad idea of having systems that can, exhibit some intelligent kinds of behaviors. In the last, 20 to 30 years, the dominant paradigm has been something called machine learning. And the big idea of machine learning is you take a lot of data and you try to extract rules from it. So that could be something, for example, like detecting spam in email, knowing if a particular message is valid or not, right? Or being able to identify people in a photo, or identifying cats and dogs, all kinds of classification types of things. And then more recently, there's been a really important technique within that called deep learning. And what makes deep learning special is that it has this concept of using neural networks with many, many, many layers. The deep aspect refers to the layers of kind of computational units that are put together. And what's special about that is it's given us a way to scale things, right? So that we found that with larger and larger models, even without a smarter underlying algorithm, you get better and better performance. You can do more and more with it just by using more computational resources. And that kind of takes us to where we are now, with this flourishing of generative AI and large language models. So large language models you can think of as kind of part of that deep learning world. And that's the more generic term. You may have heard GPT, chat GPT. The more general term for that is a large language model. And those are models that are designed to be able to understand and produce natural language, or to parse them, I should say. And then generative AI is even broader than that, really. It's not just about text. It also includes images, audio, video, even things like proteins, quite a range of things. And really, generative AI kind of reverses the machine learning concept. So now that we've got lots of models that understand rules, we're taking the rules and producing new data, right? We're not so much classifying things as creating entirely new kinds of content. So the big picture to understand about all of that is generative AI is about creating things: text, images, music, code, etc. 3D models. So to talk a little bit about like why is all of this moving so quickly? Why are there so many news headlines and things like that? I always like to start with the Gartner hype cycle for understanding just about any technology, because there tends to be a pretty similar pattern. So usually it starts out in the tech world where there's a technology trigger of some kind, right? We've figured out some kind of a new thing. And from there, there's inevitably this peak of inflated expectations, especially when marketing gets involved and there's some sort of a new vision that's being sold about what this technology is going to be able to do. And just as inevitably, that new technology cannot meet all of those expectations. There are problems, bugs, disappointments. And so we kind of enter the trough of disillusionment. Excuse me. But usually those expectations and the period of working on it has attracted enough resources and engineering talent that some part of that promise is realized. And we kind of reach a middle ground where there is a new technology. Maybe it doesn't do everything that we thought that it might do, but it's changed things. And what's kind of unique in the generative AI world is we go back to that idea of deep learning, right? That we can get more and more performance and better stuff just by using more and more computational resources. We've ended up seeing this pattern that kind of looks like this, where we have a technology trigger where a model can do more than people thought that it could. Maybe not everything. There's a little bit of disillusionment, but it inspires another round of investment in an even bigger model. Even more engineering talent goes into it. And so we see this kind of wave-like undulating pattern as things get better and better and better. And you can actually see this in terms of the amount of resources or money that's being spent in this world. So really important thing to see is that on the y-axis here, in terms of the dollars that are being spent on AI models, this is a log scale plot, right? So this is actually just a massive, massive takeoff. So let's say around 2018, 2019, cutting edge AI model took about $10,000 to train. In late 2023, it's more on the order of $100 million. There's actually some reporting that suggests that some of the really, really big models that places like Google are using are more like in the realm of $170 million. So just visually, if we think about 2018, we went from spending about a used car worth of resources on some of these AI models, and today we're spending an F-35 level amount of money on some of these things, right? And so you can ask, well, what do you get for that increase in resources? And here's just a visual comparison of an image generating tool. And it's just making a hyper realistic image of Harry Potter. And you can see that back in 2022, so long ago, right? It wasn't very realistic at all, kind of blurry, has lots of artifacts. And then it's steadily gotten better. And then in December 2023, we've got something that's fairly compelling. And just a few other examples of that. Here's another one that's actually looking at basically exactly a year from March 14th, 2022 to March 16th, 2023, image of a woman sitting in a cafe. And the initial image, there are very prominent visual artifacts, and you can see a little bit of a scene, and you can see the kind of evolution in that period of time. Another example was some food. The model in version 1 was able to capture the basic idea of what a hamburger looks like, and in version 6, we're starting to get closer to things that are photorealistic, and in fact are even a little bit difficult to differentiate from real pictures and photos. But obviously, this goes way beyond just images and artistic things. It also includes reasoning. So MMLU is a kind of a standard benchmarking tool to test how well tools like ChatGPT, LLMs can reason and answer complicated questions. I believe it's a battery of about 16,000 questions from all different kinds of knowledge areas. And you can see there's been a steady increase in the performance. And actually, Google had a groundbreaking result where their model did better than the human expert baseline. So that was the first time in history where a model was able to actually kind of beat human performance in one of these kind of knowledge domain tests. And another way we can look at this is a little bit outdated because the ChatGPT has been updated since then, but you can see its performance on a variety of things. So if you look at, for example, its performance in SATs, right? The 3.5 version went from being, 87th percentile in reading and writing, rather 70th percentile in math, and that's gone up to 93rd and 89th percentile. It's getting things like 99th percentile in verbal testing. There's, just as a side note, you'll see metrics like this all the time with LLMs. It's good to probably take this with a little bit of a grain of salt because the training data has a lot of information about these kind of tests. So these kind of knowledge domain things, they tend to do quite well. But nonetheless, these LLM tools have become fairly impressive, albeit with some limitations in what they can do. So that shifts us into more of the practical side, which is where we want to spend most of our time, which is what can you actually do with all of this stuff today? And the answer to that's going to depend on your job role, on the kinds of things you're working on. And we tend to think about this in kind of 3 categories. So the first one I would say is executive. So that is thinking through things, planning, evaluating, deciding, brainstorming, these kinds of tasks. Another bucket is relational. So that's kind of communication, copywriting, editing, maybe rehearsing, outlining. And then there is production. So creating images, code, video, music. And then, of course, everyone, has a need to explore and learn and get constructive feedback and whatever your discipline, whatever your gifts are. And of course, just, playing with technology and hopefully having some fun. So we're going to start with text generation because that really touches probably most people's job areas, the most. And we'll go through this one in the most detail. And we can look at some other things in more detail later if they're of interest. And one of the key words in this area is something called prompt engineering. And that's the idea of learning how to communicate with an AI tool effectively, knowing how to phrase the prompts or instructions that go to that tool in ways that best leverage its capacities. So just to start from really basics, if you have not seen ChatGPT before, that's probably the most popular of these tools. This is the kind of interface you're going to see. It's going to be very simple, basically a text box where you're going to talk with this kind of tool. Excuse me. And so if we warm up, like a very basic task that you might do is you might have something that you want to do, right? You want to achieve a task. And so you may ask it, I would like to start a planned giving program, right? And if you want to be a little bit more complex, you might say, provide me a complete sequence of steps and then, fill in the missing pieces. And when you do that, you might get some interesting answers. You might get some good stuff. So here's an example I'll just leave up as I'm kind of talking here. And you can see it's doing a nice job of breaking down, defining your objectives, understanding your donors, et cetera, et cetera. Decent advice. The issue here is it's very broad and generic, right? Because it doesn't know very much about you. So one of the first things that you can do to start to get a little bit more informative answers or results is to use a strategy like the flipped interaction. So there, what you're going to do is you're going to ask the tool, hey, ask me questions in order to achieve my goal. keep asking me questions until you meet some condition, whatever that is. In the example of plan giving, it might be ask me questions about the organization until you have a clear understanding of our goals, our donors, whatever it is. And then once it has that information, it's going to be able to give you a much more informative, less generic kind of answer. Because probably the biggest issue people find is that these tools tend to be kind of bland, middle of the road. This is an easy strategy you can use to get a little bit more interesting results. One tip I like to tell people too is that these tools have a tendency, like if you do something like this where you have it ask you questions, it tends to give you a bullet point list of lots and lots of questions. It can be kind of a pain to answer it out. So you may tell the tool, hey, ask me questions one at a time. That way you have kind of more of a conversational style. It's a little easier to get through. Another tactic that you can use, even on top of that, is the persona pattern. This is probably one of the second most common patterns you'll see, which is you're telling the tool to act in a particular way, to adopt a persona. As an expert in X, do Y for me. And here you can kind of modulate what you want that version of that expert to do. So if you're working on copywriting, for example, there's lots and lots of different ways to write copy. You might say, I need something in a friendly tone versus a crisp and concise tone. You can give it that level of instruction, and then ask it, to do a task. And another tip here is that, particularly if you're exploring things like copywriting, is you might start with very, very small tasks and get it feedback so that you ensure that you're kind of in the right style or the right mode for what you're looking for, and then have it go on and maybe work on something else. Yet another tactic here is informing the tool of the audience that you're looking for. So you want to explain topic to a person with this kind of a background. So the stewardship example could be, here we're using a mixture of things, right? We're using the persona tactic, act as a communication coach, and then say, offer tips to non-fundraising staff, working in a nonprofit about how to listen and respond to opportunities. So we're giving it a goal, in other words. One really neat thing you can do, LLMs are incredibly flexible with their ability to take instructions. So you can give them really broad things. Like I find a go-to I use all the time, if I want a nice generic description of something, is to say, explain this at the level of a bright high school student. That tends to get you something that's going to have general kind of level knowledge, but it's not going to be too simplified. And you can really stretch this to the absolute limits to try to get new perspective on things. Like here's a really crazy example. Explain plan giving to a bird, right? And here's what it does. So explain plan giving to a bird, and it kind of models out this silly little conversation. But the interesting thing is there's little things in here that are kind of clever and surprising, right? One great thing that you can do with LLMs too, is just for exploring topics, is help it to even ask you better questions, right? So you could say, whenever I ask a question, suggest a better version of the question to use instead, and then ask if I'd prefer to use that version of it, right? So you could say, maybe you don't know very much about online giving, and you're just starting from absolute zero. You could give that as kind of a background prompt, and then it will help you kind of refine the questions. Now, the major caveat on this is that tools like ChatGPT are not always 100% accurate. In fact, they can be wildly wrong. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So you have to be really careful when you're working in a domain that you don't know very well, because it could mislead you. However, I do still recommend things like this, because as long as you're focusing on the questions, right, rather than the answers, that can actually still be helpful. It may orient you to things you didn't necessarily know about. This is just a practical note to inject in here throughout all of these different things, is you're not limited to just a conversational style chat. You can actually instruct these tools to use specific formats. So you can tell it, put things in a table, a list, a spreadsheet, bullet points, etc. And in fact, one thing I often will do is like this example here. Let's say creating a reading list about a particular topic, and then say, let's put that in a table, and then include a 2-sentence description of why you made the recommendation, and then put a score in there, right, of some kind. And that can be very helpful if you're trying to, kind of tabulate information for others or for use later. You don't always have to read through just plain text. So in our litany of techniques here, the next one is priming. So priming is when you're actually giving the tool an example of a style that you would like it to adopt. So let's say you're writing subject lines for an email. You might give it one or many 5, 10 subject lines, however many, to give it a sense of what the style is and instruct it, hey, use this similar kind of style. this is a little bit of a departure, and this is probably the most underappreciated thing, and I would say the one that I personally use the most, and I know Carl and I use pretty extensively now actually, is using these tools for criticism. This can be great when you are in the middle of a complicated project and you have lost your objectivity and you are really tunnel visioned into the details. You can you can give something to a tool like this and basically say, be a copy editor for me, right? The example I have here is, act using the persona pattern, act as a seasoned editor with an eye for inauthentic language, right? Give me a scale. And this is great for finding small things that you may have missed. And as these tools become more complex, they're actually multimodal now. So what you can do is you could upload an image, you could upload a design, a screenshot of software is one that I've personally started to use quite frequently, and get feedback. A couple of tips if you want to try this out for something like criticism. Most of these tools, they are designed to be almost obsequious to the user. They are very, very reluctant to give you any kind of criticism. So you may need to encourage it. You may need to say, it's okay to give me, tough constructive criticism. And I would also recommend asking for a rating, a numerical rating, because that can kind of help calibrate some of the feedback that it's giving, because it may be a little bit too polite otherwise. So another complicated one that I use personally quite a bit is using an LLM, not so much for having it teach me how to do something, but rather how to find outside material. So that could be books, movies, whatever. This is a very complicated prompt, so we'll just kind of focus on the basic parts of it. So the idea is we're using the persona pattern, telling it, okay, you are a guide for people that are embarking on PhD programs. I'll tell you in a minute why we're using that framing. We give it some assumptions, audience, right? Assume that they're reasonably well educated, but looking to go into deeper material, provide at least 5 recommendations, and then identify the most crucial 2 if they're pressed for time, and then give that concise explanation of why. So the reason why this has this kind of PhD program framing, this is a way to kind of hack around the tendency of these tools to give basic answers by telling it, hey, we're looking for something advanced. We're looking for something, PhD level. Even if we're not PhD students, that's not really our objective. It can help push things into a little bit more complex territory and avoid some of the basic stuff. And one thing you may find is that even with that prompting, it's giving you material, you're already familiar with, or things that are a little too basic. And you can always push it a bit further and say, okay, give me another 5 recommendations. Or you can even tell it, hey, that's too basic for me. I want to go a bit further. Another tactic that can be helpful for pushing beyond too basic level answers to things is iteration. For brainstorming, basically. So you can say, give me 50 ideas for a plan giving effort, 100 ideas. And the idea is that you want to exhaust, the first 5 or 10 that might be a little bit staid or overly familiar, and get into the more creative material. Of course, the problem there is that the suggestions might get a little bit strange as you start to push into higher numbers, because the model is going to struggle to give something that meets that. But it can be a helpful tool if you're finding, that you're getting answers that are interesting, but maybe a little too basic. And also on that theme is novelty. So you can even instruct the tool, give me surprising information, give me a counterintuitive insight. Imagine that I have told someone one sentence about a topic that shocked them, and give me 10 candidates for what that sentence was. Right? It's a sort of a weird way of thinking, but it's a little bit more creatively charged. An example I've been starting to use a little bit more often is, imagine we're making a syllabus, right? So for a syllabus I'm creating on topic X, imagine 7 radically different people teaching the same course, and then give me bullet points representing each teacher, their ideas, and then what their outcomes would be for the class. And that's a great way you can sort of walk around a topic from the different vantage points involved. And of course, if you find one that's particularly interesting to you, maybe it's complementary to what you know, you can always say, all right, give me the next level of detail on this professor's version of that class, and then kind of go and explore that branch. Another one I don't know that we have used as much, but I think there is interest out there, is using it for rehearsing of conversations, and that may be more or less relevant depending on on what you do. And it's the same principles apply, right? We setting up a persona that you're going to have the conversation with, and that could be difficult conversations, or it could be much more generic things. But the main idea here is that creativity is really the limit of a lot of these techniques. So now all of that's great, but there's really important warnings that come along with this. So LLMs, they are engineered really to produce plausible text, not necessarily accurate text. So they absolutely do get things wrong. They will hallucinate things. You often hear that term, in the press, where they will just kind of make things up out of thin air. There's an enormous amount of effort that is going into fixing some of those things and making them more reliable. But it's very important to know that they do make big mistakes sometimes. They can also plagiarize to various degrees. As I've mentioned, multiple times here, the biggest issue often is that they're just kind of bland. They give you a middle of the road kind of insights unless they're pushed in these distinctive ways. And important to know is that they can seem very very convincing even when they are very wrong, right? Because the machine learning task that they've been given is make text that seems real, that seems plausible, and that's not necessarily the same thing as accurate text. So, for example, things you don't want to use with LLMs, I would say you don't ever, try to write something and copy paste it. That's not only is that kind of plagiarism, I think it's just you're likely to run into trouble in terms of accuracy. Be very careful when you're using it in subjects you're not that knowledgeable about. You can't replace experts. As much as there's interest and there's a temptation to do that, I would really recommend you resist that. Like I said, you can't rely on them to be factually correct. So examples we've seen before for people are, let's say, writing a fundraising pitch for an organization. Don't rely on the LLM to know the specific, let's say, historical details of that organization. But where I think they can be very useful, as we've seen, they're great for brainstorming, for catching obvious mistakes, exploring alternatives, new topics. So great uses, generate 10 new ideas that you're going to check out later, or find a new book recommendation, or something like that you can kind of calibrate, so to speak. So, okay, so we'll switch a little bit to visual art. And here I'm going to go pretty quickly and skip over because I'm just not sure, how relevant this will be for everybody. I'm more than happy to go back through if there's interest in it, and talk about it in a little bit more detail. But I'll just try to give kind of a flavor of what the general workflows are like these days. So just like we can produce art or produce text, rather, you can have models that produce images, as I'm sure you've probably seen out there. And the basics of this is just like ChatGPT, you have a text prompt where you're telling the tool what you'd like to see, and then it goes out and makes it. So you could be specifying things like the medium, a photo, a painting, an illustration, the subject, the environment. And this is one of those areas that it very much rewards your knowledge of art history or your kind of visual vocabulary, so to speak, in terms of what you would like to see. And just as a warm up example, my daughter's 2 months old, and like a lot of new parents, we're in this phase right now of making lots of custom stuff and mugs. And we have a cat with a big personality. And so we wanted to make just custom stickers that we might do, right, based on him. So here you can see an example where I'm specifying the type of sticker. He's slightly chubby, gray cat, and he's in this pose in a childlike anime style. So that's a silly example where you can just a low effort way to kind of make fun things. But you can do a lot more, right? You can use this kind of vocabulary to get very specific images. And a typical workflow you'll see now that's on the easier side of things is to use ChatGPT and then DALL-E, which is its built-in image generation tool. And this is very conversational. So here I'm saying I'd like an editorial illustration. I'm telling it, maybe for an instructional video or a magazine, giving it some design pointers. I want mid-century graphic design, but I don't want it to be too, dated. You can get the sense that this is a conversation, almost like you might have with an artist to be able to create something. An extremely important thing to know about the way that this works is that it will take your prompt, and then on the back end, what it will do is it'll actually rewrite it and often expand it because they have a whole bunch of data that basically they have ways of augmenting the prompts that we might write to get better results. So in this workflow, you don't have as much control, but if you're not able to necessarily specify absolutely everything that you want, you don't know the particular terms, this tool will try to help kind of work around that. And it's been getting more sophisticated. So more recent version of it, here's an example. I asked again, a magazine editorial style illustration of a Presbyterian church building. And it took me too literally. You might be able to see that it's sort of made an image like of a magazine, and there's a little bit of text in there that I actually don't want, right? And so the tool will let you now highlight portions of the image and say, alter it in whatever way. So that could be, in this case, just getting rid of it. It could be changing an expression on a face. It's the same workflow of conversationally kind of iterating what you want. So more advanced workflows are a totally different animal. They're probably more of a specialist thing. Here's an example of a tool called Stable Diffusion. And this is something where you're going to get into the really nitty gritty of determining absolutely everything about the algorithm. And this is kind of the opposite of the DALL-E approach, where you have total control over the image. And here's just a little case study that I did, again, kind of with a Presbyterian building and trying out different styles, right, doing different iterations of something. These are just close-ups of the same, so you can see that we're just trying out different things, right? But the idea is you're going to generate lots of images, and maybe you're only going to get one or two that are particularly of interest. So somewhat recently, Carl and I did this kind of crazy project where we made a plan giving video game, and we used a lot of these tools to generate the art for us, because neither of us are, are artists necessarily. And you can see kind of the range of different things. We could have these Pixar style characters, different kind of paintings, and things like that. So, these are not necessarily use cases you encounter every day, but these tools can be very, very interesting in that context. So we'll skip over this. This is a little bit more advanced kind of stuff. If you're interested in image generation and you want to get started, I would say that the two best options are probably DALL-E, and then there's also Midjourney. Midjourney has a lot of kind of buzz out there because it's kind of in the middle. It gives you a bit more control, say than DALL-E. But it's also not as complicated to get started as something like Stable Diffusion. But if you are a professional artist or designer or working, with very high end stuff, you might be interested if you are not getting enough control to explore things like Stable Diffusion. So with that, this is going to be even more whirlwind. And unfortunately, we had a technical issue. We're going to see if we can find a way to send you this song. It's a shame I can't share this actually, because music generation is a very recent thing. And it is, I would say, surpassing a lot of people's expectations. Here was an example. It was going to be kind of kind of an upbeat jingle talking about plan giving. Again, silly example, but just sort of showing that you can throw just about anything at these tools and they're able to come up with something. Video editing is another realm. I know a lot of people do work in that area. There are tools like Runway ML that are starting to incorporate AI. That can be anything from erasing things from a background to expanding images, even to generating entirely new video clips. The excitement in the video generation world has been this tool called Sora, also from OpenAI. So here, this mammoth that you're seeing is an AI generated clip. This is not available to the public. This is one of those things they're a little bit worried, about the kind of societal implications and things like deepfakes. So they're still testing. But the state of the art on this is getting a more and more advanced, like so many of these topics. Oops, there we go. Something to be aware of too is there are more and more efforts to incorporate these kinds of tools in programming, right? So one of them is retrieval augmented generation. That's a way where you can let the LLM know how to actually access external systems, reference external data sets. So rather than it trying to make things up from whole cloth, it can kind of look things up in a database. Yeah, these are very advanced uses, so I'm just going to skip by those. Just to have a sense of what it is. This is the idea of you can show an LLM a picture of one thing and then have it actually reverse engineer what the prompt should be, and then go and create a new version of it. So, all right, so we'll start to wrap up and get towards questions. And I just wanted to look just very briefly at a couple of things, kind of voices of caution. So this is from a paper called Managing AI Risks in an Era of Rapid Progress that was co-authored by really the leading people in the AI field. And so what they had to say was that in 2019, GPT-2 could not reliably count to 10. 4 years later, deep learning systems can write software, generate photorealistic scenes on demand, advise on intellectual topics, and combine language and image processing to steer robots. So the pace of progress may surprise us again. Companies are engaged in a race to create generalist AI systems that match or exceed human abilities. There's no fundamental reason why that progress should slow or halt. And this is an important part here that tech companies have cash reserves on hand to scale these training runs. Going back to the beginning of the presentation with deep learning and spending more and more, they have the reserves to be able to make yet larger models. And of course, it's a question mark of where that will take us in the future. And in fact, in the news headlines, you can see things like Microsoft's supposed 100 billion supercomputing project to even go an order of magnitude. Sorry, I think I may have lost audio for a moment there. apologize if so. Um, so yeah, on the sort of notes of caution, because I definitely don't want to give the impression that AI is some sort of wonderful tool that can do everything. Going back to the hype thing, there are real drawbacks, there are real concerns. So some of the more prominent concerns is that the energy that it requires to train these models is enormous, right? And it comes with CO2 emissions. And also, I think a lot of people, understandably, myself included, have reservations about the technology. Recent survey found, products and services using artificial intelligence makes me nervous. We went from 39% of respondents agreeing that to 52%. In surveys of national attitudes, the U.S. is kind of near the bottom. I think around 30% of people are positive about AI. So those concerns are very real and valid. And I think are something to keep in mind, especially when working on things like stewardship or philanthropy, where authenticity is extremely important. I definitely encourage people to be very thoughtful about how they use these tools, and avoid, again, the kind of copy paste phenomenon. I think it's great when these tools can push us to be more creative or to try out new things, but we want to be very careful that we're not substituting just a personal opinion. So if you find this talk interesting, I would definitely recommend checking out a Coursera class called Generative AI for Everyone. That's taught by a real legend in this field that can go a little bit deeper yet if you're interested in that. And I'll just close by going back to that silly example, right, of what can we learn from the birds about planned giving. This is just a little 10-minute case study I did of trying to make some AI art based on some of the themes there, and just a little comic book, right? Um, so I'll stop there and open up for questions.
Hey, I'll first thank you for that. That was like a remarkable amount of information that you've compiled in a really brief amount of time, and I'm sure there's a million questions. Um, First, Adam, I'd like to may I make that offer? There's a one-page cheat sheet we put together before, because there's a lot of information here. It's easy to watch it again, but like
Yeah,
how to use this,
yeah.
it's something where do you want to speak on that or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I sort of apologize too because there's a bit of a fire hose, particularly with the techniques. But we find that like so much of the conversation is really generic, so we want to do the opposite. We want to go into really specific stuff. And like I said, I hope that at least one of those things caught your eye. We do have a handout that we've compiled that is just sort of a one-page cheat sheet on these techniques with examples. And the talk is being recorded, so you could certainly go through again. But yeah, we'll definitely make that available. Um,
thanks? Because I use AI pretty often, and I get in the habit of like one way to use it, one way to ask questions. And having this cheat sheet, we highlighted several different ways to interact with it, and it really makes it easy to use it in a robust fashion so that you can do some amazing things in a really brief amount of time, even if you have a low tech level like me. So I just wanted to make that offer because there's a lot here, and this will simplify it for the ways most of us would use it on a stewardship committee. Yeah. Um, Actually, and before I open up to the first question, I also want to say I've used this to ask it to make policies for a Presbyterian church. I've used it to review policies. There are some voice capabilities that there's a lot of good reasons to use. Like you could have something converted into from text into audio. There are like unlimited ways that we've found, and Adam's helpful for that stuff as well. It's just that it is a fire hose. Um, anyway, we can open it up to questions now. Does anyone have any? Or are they all answered?
I have a question. This is Emily D'Andrea. I'm pastor at Potomac Presbyterian Church. So, just to get started, do
yeah.
we just go to Chat GPT? Is that I'm just
Yeah, I would say that's probably the best starting point to just kind of explore a little bit and get started. And like I said, everything is such a moving target with this. Just yesterday, the company that makes it, OpenAI, they had their big spring update, and they say they are now making ChatGPT, their newest model, I think, available to everyone. So I believe they've even tried to take down the barriers in terms of signing up for an account. Like I think you can just go in, but sometimes it takes a little while for that goes in, for that promise to be fulfilled. But yes, I would recommend for most people, because ChatGPT these days it has what they call multimodal models. So it has the ability to make images, understand images, it can talk to you. The big thing that was in that most recent update is they've made it all faster. So if you want to have like a dialogue with it, a conversation, they've gotten the speed of it, they claim, down to the point where it's similar to a human person having a conversation with you. So that's probably the easiest way to try out all of these different things. There is an absolute huge universe of companies that are doing little bits and pieces of this, right? Like the music generation and so on. But ChatGPT is the best, like, first place to go, I would say.
Right. Thank
Adam,
you.
there are versions of ChatGPT. What would be best for us?
Well, because and again, this has all changed very recently. The 4.0 model, I believe that they're calling it, the 4.0 Omni model, is probably the best. That's the most balanced in terms of its reasoning ability. That's a good point that you bring up, is that almost all of these companies and tools will have different versions that have different levels of capability. And typically it's the reasoning level of the LLM that varies, and also the speed, right? So they'll have lower end things that are super fast and super cheap, but they're not as smart. And so it depends on what you're doing, right? Because a lot of people who are making simpler kinds of products, they want fast and cheap, and they don't need a super smart agent. Whereas, if you're doing things in the executive realm, you're trying to think through a hard problem, you want the absolute smartest agent you can get. So I would say use the most up-to-date thing you can.
Is 4.0 free?
4.0 is supposed to be free. Like I said, because they just announced this yesterday. I don't know if all of that's in action yet. I know they're doing a desktop application and a whole bunch of stuff, but typically they kind of space it out when it actually truly becomes available to people. But should be soon.
Awesome. Thanks. Questions?
I have a question. So I'm Dina Bickle, Administrative Coordinator at NCP. Carl, you had mentioned that you use it to create policy or check policy. How does like privacy work? So for example, if I put in our NCP policy, does that mean it's all out there for everyone to see, view, use?
That's a great question. I have a very weak answer, and Adam has a very specific answer. Adam.
Yeah, so I would say it's not out there totally in the universe for anyone to check out, but there are all kinds of fine print kinds of things where these companies they're very interested in data. They're all extremely data hungry, because that's what makes the next version, going back to that kind of undulating wave. Data is actually as much of a resource, maybe even more so of a resource, than the computational power is. So you do have to check the fine print. You do want to be careful, because you may be giving OpenAI that information. Now, what they're likely to do with it is just generic model training, but if you have something of high concern, you definitely don't want to put it into these kinds of tools. There's a whole other thing. It's a more complicated topic, but there's a very intense conversation going on in the AI world about open source tools. So the ability to actually take these models and run them on your own computer. So an example of this, Facebook has been Meta, I should say, the parent company of Facebook, is really the pioneer and leader in the space. So they put out a model called Llama 3, and the idea with that is you can, if you want, rent your own server resources, run this model in a totally enclosed environment, and that's where you could do more privacy constrained things. Some of the other companies, so Anthropic would be an example. Anthropic, I think, is increasingly sort of specializing in this, actually, where they have more privacy controls and training data controls. They're more for the enterprise kind of consumer, or enterprise rather than consumer customer. So there are options out there. It's definitely a good idea to be smart about what information you give to these tools.
Adam, does your presentation include those options? Did we see a slide that kind of gave us an idea of what our options are?
Yeah, let me take a look at, maybe I skipped over one of them. I know in another version I have one on imagery, but let's take a look back here. Um, oh, you know what? I think I may have actually removed one, but this is an extremely good point. I do have something I can put in, because usually what we've done too is I'll make a PDF of this presentation and then share that with with you all. So I can put in a slide that kind of compares some of the different examples and companies.
Yes, that would be helpful.
Great.
Fantastic. It's a great time to ask questions. There's no bad question. It's amazing what people don't know about this. So
Also, too, if you have experiences of using it, we're really fascinated. I mean, that's one of the things I think has been the most fun for us, is to talk to people who are using AI in different capacities, and almost always, like, people have stories. So if you have anything or challenges you've encountered, or um, yeah, anything, we're always fascinated to hear that.
I don't have experience. I'm just going to jump in. We're looking to create a strategic plan, and the way that you're talking makes me think I could use some of these constraints, like audience, refining questions, priming, criticism, or whatever,
Mhm.
and help to shape the strategic plan. I mean, when we did this before, we did, meeting after meeting after meeting for hours and hours and hours, and maybe this might streamline that process a little bit. I don't know
Yeah,
if you
it
have
can.
experience with that.
Not that exactly, but I mean, I think, yeah, strategic planning is definitely one of those things where, well, there's a lot of brainstorming, right? And there's also a lot of cases where you might be looking for blind spots, and that's something you can do in the prompting too. Is you can say, hey, I'm really worried about that we've got a blind spot somewhere here. Can you help me? Have I overlooked anything? Right? Those kind of things. And maybe the answer it gives you is not going to be absolutely world class, but often you're not looking for that, right? You were looking for obvious kinds of things. So I definitely recommend, like, I can't really emphasize enough that criticism is as valuable as trying to get something kind of out of whole cloth. I think that's the biggest mistake that I've seen, is trying to give a tool one big prompt and expecting that it will give you a magic answer that's all wrapped up and ready to go. In reality, I think you have to kind of chunk off different pieces of it and then work on it and iterate and have the conversation and then put it all together, and you get the best results that way typically.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Jerry Fields. I'm on the Stewardship Committee. Thank you so much for everything that you have been sharing. I'm also part-time pastor at Adelphi Presbyterian Church. I have absolutely no background in AI. I'm wondering if there is a list of phrases that
Mhm.
would be good to have, so that when I start to play around with it, I can just insert those phrases without having to think about it.
Yeah, definitely. Our cheat sheet that we'll send out is probably going to be the best thing for that. So it even kind of expands on a couple of these things. So, like, we give a bunch of examples of personas that you might use. Like, an unusual one that comes off the top of my head is like, act as a documentary filmmaker, give me advice about how to shoot this donor story. Those kinds of things, unusual perspectives. We've got a big list of different things you can play around with. So we'll definitely send that out.
Thank you.
Sure.
So then you ask that question, and then how do you like refine it using criticism, using all the
Mhm.
other modes that you have, other
Yeah,
options?
it's a lot of times it's like, kind of imagine having a conversation with a person, right? Where you can give them that, you can give it that feedback directly. Like, if it's giving you something and it's too generic, too specific, too whatever, you can say, don't do that. Try this instead, right? And I think what could be counterintuitive is like the librarian example, right? Where I say, pretend like you're advising people in a PhD program, because probably most of us were not thinking in terms of a PhD program. But when you think about PhD, we think of an elevated level, more complicated, more complex. So those are creative ways you can push it in that direction. That's kind of the more complicated skill that comes with time. And I think you kind of get a sense of it just playing with these tools. You'll get a sense of what its limitations are, and just keep thinking, it's almost like you're an improv, right? Like, you need to just keep pushing the boundaries. And it's a tool, like, it's safe to do that with. You can just try to try out, even wildly creative things with it. But one of the biggest things, I definitely go back to iteration too, is like just keep pushing it for more and more and more. That's one of the simplest things you can do, is that if you're getting very generic results, just try to get all of that kind of out. And then you can usually get into more creative territories. That's the simplest thing to start with.
And how do you do that? You put whatever prompt, whatever output that it gave you, you put it back into ChatGPT, and then you ask the question.
Yeah. So for example, like if I'm doing that librarian one, right? And I said, give me 5 book recommendations on plan giving, plan communication styles and plan giving, whatever. And it gives me the first 5. Unless I've read all of them, I could say, oh, I know all of those. Give me 5 more. Give me 10 more. Give me 20 more, and just keep pushing it. And then it just like again, like just what you would do in a conversational kind of style, and it'll keep going with you. Now, one thing you'll find is that the more you push it, and especially if it's a niche topic, that more likely that you're going to get hallucinations, because it's going to run out of real things it can tell you. There may only be, so many books on a particular topic. Like I remember for a personal interest of mine, I was researching something in history, and I was doing that. And then it gave me this book, and I was like, wow, I've heard of that person. I've heard of that scholar. It's really interesting. And then I looked it up, and the book absolutely does not exist, right? It seemed plausible. It was within the person's research interests, but such a book just doesn't exist. So that's just a caveat, I guess.
So
So
can you be specific and talk, like if I was doing a stewardship program and I wanted ideas, could I say, give me ideas to reach millennials?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. That would be an excellent one where you're specifying the particular.
For the different generations, give me ideas on how to reach them.
Yeah, definitely. You could absolutely do that. Yeah. I mean, you could even say, and you can put all this stuff together, right? You could say, make me a table. I want 5 ideas for each generational band. So Gen Y, Gen X, whatever. And you can give it, whatever feedback that you might give a person. Like if you want to say, don't fall into the lazy stereotype that all millennials just want to look at things on their phones. You can tell it that, right? Just tell it what you want, basically.
Okay.
And you can also, because we did this, we said, hey, can you give us a series of 5 blurbs for millennials? And they might give it to you. And I want it more exciting. I want it more exciting. Uh, make it to make it rhyme or do them all in haiku. You can keep having this conversation and get some really crazy stuff that turns into like really interesting. So it's this conversation partner.
Yeah.
Because that first iteration might be, like Adam said, like really bland. So tell it that. And I've done something where I said, hey, put this to them, this letter is great, but make it go to the beat of, or the tune of Taylor Swift's like latest song. It will make things rhyme. You can make it be funny. If it's not funny enough, make it be funnier. But you can keep having that conversation so that you're getting that audience that you want. Like make 5 Instagram posts, texts for it. But that constant conversation is where I've had like the most fun. But then going back to this cheat sheet to kind of expand, because after a while you think, wow, I've really got this, but then you're in a rut. I have to keep rethinking how to interact with it. Like I did here's one example. I did a narrative budget. Like I said, hey, I want to write a narrative budget. Typed in the name of the church, and it has a lot of kind of the context of that specific church. And then wrote, here's our 5 main categories, 20% to each of these categories. We have an endowment, but it's paying this much out, but we don't want people to be overly reliant. And it addresses everything that you give it. It's not final copy, but I would say it is, what I've gotten out of that was like 10 times better than what we would have come up with on our own. It gave us this amazing structure and and the words that were compelling. It's really good.
Yeah, one example or way of thinking I've heard often is, imagine that you're grabbing a professional in whatever discipline off the street, and asking them your question. If they don't know anything about you, the answer they're going to give is going to be very generic, very middle of the road. So the more that you're able to kind of inform that discussion, the better. One thing just to add on that is, because these things are multimodal, meaning that they can do things other than just text. if you're comfortable with it, if it works within your privacy guidelines or whatever, you can do simple things like take a screenshot of your website and say, this is our aesthetic, right? This is the thing that we're the most proud of in terms of our design, our print design. Use these themes, influences, whatever, and do this. And you can just see, sometimes it does a remarkable job. Sometimes it misses the mark, but it rewards that kind of experimentation.
All right. We're almost at 1 hour together. Any other questions before we wrap it up? This is not the last chance you'll have to ask questions. You can send us questions after the fact, but we'll send out the recording and the cheat sheet at a minimum. We'll put that on the Presbyterian's website.
And I'll have the PDF of the slides as well, and I will put in that slide that has a little bit of a comparison of the different options out there.
Carl, this is Evie Melberg from Petersburg. One word of caution on using these. Any personal information you put in is open to the public. So you need to be aware of that. And it will stay there. So just have to be careful. And then the other question is, I've been hearing about Microsoft Copilot. Is that similar to ChatGPT, and how would that be beneficial to us?
Yes. So Copilot is a specific product that is mostly for programmers and developers. So it's taking the ChatGPT idea and extending it into the programming world. And it has made a big difference for people like myself that write software because it can do things like, it can write software for you in some instances. Although, like a lot of these other tools, it gets things wrong, right? So the industry is kind of figuring out how we use things. As you mentioned, there are privacy concerns as well. But you can think of Copilot as the programmer developer version of kind of ChatGPT. And I should say too, like there's lots of other tools out there for different industries and domains, and I would expect to see more and more of that in months and years ahead.
Actually, if I could just comment about Copilot.
Yeah.
I'm not a programmer. I've just used it. I'm going to be in Washington, D.C. Later this week in a kind of an advocacy role for my professional association. And I asked Copilot as me as a technical expert, to write a message to a politician about the importance of what we're going to advocate for. And it did a fine job, nothing to do with programming. And then I prompted some other questions, like I can provide you information on public policy related things or funding, the things you're advocating for. It did a fine job. So I wouldn't shy away from Copilot.
Sure.
So,
yeah. A lot of them.
It did a fine job. You have to know the subject. For me as a technical expert in the field, it came back with some things about the issues that weren't really relevant. But, in our world, we should probably know what we're talking about in terms of stewardship or whatever. So
that's a common story. I was talking to a healthcare provider recently and about their experiences with AI, and they mentioned that there was like a piece of guidance that had changed in the last year, where they used to recommend people do X, now they want them to do Y, and it got things like that wrong, right? Because in most of the training data, it's under the X guidance, and when it was pushed, it actually knew about the new guidance, but it didn't necessarily incorporate it. So that's a common thing, and experts can spot those kind of things. That's why I always say with people, like, I've heard bad advice out there of like, you could write a speech about a topic you know nothing about using ChatGPT. And I would say, really don't do that, because you're going to do like what you're saying. You're going to include something that's irrelevant or, is wrong maybe. But it gets you a good start, right? Especially for the use case of writing a note to a politician or someone. I'm sure it was a lot easier to have a draft to start with and then hammer it into shape, into the right thing, than to kind of start with a blank canvas.
I've used Copilot quite a bit, to be honest with you, because it's right there on my desktop. It's just automatic.
Are they calling? Is that what they're calling? They see
Microsoft Copilot is there.
Okay, they rebranded, because I apologize for that, because Copilot used to be the more technical product, but they've rebranded it. They've had issues. Microsoft had terrible issues in the early days where their AI agents were a little crazy. They would say kind of wild things.
It was bad a little while ago, but it is caught up. I use it a lot.
See, so you guys, this stuff changes so quickly.
Yeah, it pops right up in your Edge browser or probably your Bing search bar.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, that's good. Good. Great question. Thank you for that, Evie. It's so good to have your insights. That's great. Hey, Adam, thank you so much. all the stuff in your head, we get to like just have it in a bowl here to pick ideas out of. This is really fantastic.
Oh, thank you. It's my
thank you,
absolute
Emil.
pleasure. It's always always fun to talk about this. Yeah.
Good stuff. And for everyone else, we will get some materials up on the Presbyterian website. Unless there's another, Luan, is that the most effective way for us to get it out? Is through the website?
Yes, but who is registered, as soon as Adam gets the material to me, I can email it to you. You won't have the link to this. For most of you know, we're getting ready to go in a Presbyterian meeting. Give me some time for the recording to post, but I can send the handouts immediately to those who registered, so you can sort of look it over while this is fresh in your brain, and then it will all post to the website sometime next week.
My last invitation before we say goodbye is if there is anything where we could go a next step with this that people want to see, like, hey, let's workshop this together. That might be something we could pull together, like really practical applications, and maybe doing that online together. A few examples. I would love to see that happen, but I don't want to propose something that there is no interest in. So let us know by responding to that email if it's okay. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Great presentation, Carl.
Good to see you, Phil.
Adam.
It's Adam. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.